Hi, everybody. It's Kathleen here at A Great Good Place for Books, and I am super excited to welcome two of my favorite people. We were just talking about how long we've known each other. Ayelet and I have known each other, about 23, 24 years. And Deb and I have known each other about 10, 12, if not longer.
10, no, since 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, I absolutely love Deb's debut novel, The Red Book, and sold like oodles of copies because it was one of my favorite books of the year. And she's also the New York Times bestselling author of Shutterbabe. And tonight we're celebrating her new book called LADYPARTS. And Ayelet is just Ayelet. What can I say? We've known each other forever. I've been spit up on by all her kids, I think. Three out of four. It's great to see you guys, and I'm so excited, and I'm gonna let you guys get talking. So let's welcome everybody.
I am going to start by doing a little bit more of an introduction because I always like to talk about my dear, dear, dear friend Deb because her life has been so incredible and she's so brilliant. So Deb was like the tiniest, youngest war photographer right out of college. She took off to places like Afghanistan, to the Soviet Union, to Zimbabwe, Romania. I mean, anywhere that there was a conflict and a need to photograph it, Deb was there, and she wrote this remarkable memoir about her experiences in photojournalism. It was called Shutterbabe. And after I finish telling you about her, there's a story I'm going to make her tell you because I feel like this is Deb in a nutshell. But after Shutterbabe, Deb also wrote this beautiful, beautiful book called Between Here and April, which has, it won prizes. It was a bestseller. It's incredible. And then she followed up with one of my favorite of her books, which speaks, I think, to all of our experiences. It's called Hell is Other Parents. My favorite essay in that book is this essay about Deb inadvertently becoming a stage mother to her son, who is an actor who insisted on pursuing this career. He was this little dude, and he got this starring role in the movie, and then suddenly Deb and her dad were stage mothering and stage fathering him. And then you heard about the Red Book, which is a terrific book. And this particular memoir, LADYPARTS, it's particularly close to my heart because I feel like I lived so much of this experience with Deb, but I think it's just an incredibly important piece of literature. It's important to women. It's important to people who know women and care about women because it says something deeply profound about what it is like to live in our women's bodies. So I'm going to roll back, Deb, and I want you to tell the story about Afghanistan and about when you had to pee.
Oh, okay. So, God, when I had to pee and we were in a minefield, what would happen is a mujahideen would have to walk in the snow and I would have to follow his exact footsteps. And I couldn't stray from those footsteps. Do you want the first time I did this or the time when he got his leg blown off?
Oh, let's do both, shall we?
Well, one time they made me carry one of their Kalashnikovs. And so I'm carrying a Kalashnikov, but I also am wearing a burqa. So the burqa's over me, the Kalashnikov sticking outside of the back of the burqa.
And how old are you? How old
22,
are you? 22 years old.
And I had my period. And so I've got this burqa and I've got to pee and change my tampon in the middle of a minefield. And I kind of asked the guy to go away, and there was just, blood everywhere. I didn't have, my tampons were in my backpack that somebody had sat on, and it was next to a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and the rubbing alcohol went over all the tampons, and they kind of bloomed out of the Tampax box like a flower, and they were all destroyed. So I just was like, okay, I guess I'll just put my pants back on now. And it was a disaster. And then the other time was that a man got his legs blown off walking me to pee, and that was not funny at all, at all.
I mean, I think that says like so much. That the reason I love that story, the first one, but also the second one means so much to me is because here you were so young and you were so brave and you were doing something so important and doing it in a way like you had to deal with so much extra shit as a woman. Like the male photojournalists who were covering that same war just stuck a dick off the side of the Jeep. You know, they did not have to like figure out how to keep their Tampax dry when they were doing this. And I feel like your whole career, you have been doing that. You've been like, you know, dancing as hard as Fred Astaire, but backwards and in heels. And
that's a definition for being a woman, right? You know,
maybe you could talk a little bit about like, was there a moment when you realized that everything you were doing, you were going to have to do harder, better, and under more complex circumstances than the guys in your life?
I mean, I think Afghanistan's a really good place to start there because, you know, when you were a man covering the war in Afghanistan, you just grew a beard, you put on a pakul hat, and you dressed like the Mujahideen, and nobody knew nobody was any the wiser. If you're a woman, they made you wear a burqa. And I don't know if anyone knows exactly what a burqa is, but there's a screen over your eyes with like mesh. You can't see. If you're a photojournalist, you're fucked. Oh, sorry, I don't know if we're about to say that online, whatever. You're messed up. And at one point I just took the burqa off and I said, you know, very Shakespearean, like, you know, make me a man. I can't be a woman in this situation. You need to make me a man. And they each had, somebody had an extra hat, somebody had an extra scarf. I wrapped this thing around my mouth so you couldn't tell that I didn't have a beard, you know, and they gave me, you know, one of their jackets. And then I was, you know, a small little man.
You know, it's just remarkable. And also I think like my kids are older than you were then, and I don't even like for them to be out of touch for a week, let alone off in Afghanistan covering a war.
And remember, there were no cell phones back then too.
So there was no way for it. Then what made you like, what do you think it was about you as a person that made you go off and do that when you were so young? And so, I mean, to be clear, you just graduated from Harvard. I'd like to drop that in too.
Okay, so I think what it was the summer before my senior year. Gilles Perez is a Magnum photographer, and he was teaching at Harvard as a visiting professor. And I loved him. I just loved his energy. I loved who he was. I loved his lectures. And he gave this lecture once, and he said, you know, that you have to get close to the war and close to the situation and close to history to really understand it. And I was a really bad history student. I just couldn't keep things in my head. I couldn't keep dates. I couldn't keep who did what to whom. And I actually thought I like reading about history. I just can't retain it. And so when I went to work at Magnum that summer, he invited me to be an intern at Magnum. I spent the entire summer looking at, you know, photos of Robert Capa, Jim Nachtwey, Joseph Kudelka, you know, all these incredible Magnum war photographers. And I just thought, like, that sounds really exciting. And my own photography was about going into areas that were dangerous to women, specifically dangerous to women. And whenever a man would say, hey, baby, you want to get it on? I'd say, no, thanks, but I would like to shoot your photo, because I'd been, you know, I'd had several assaults. A man broke into my room, threatened to rape me. I was date raped. So the idea was go into these areas that are dangerous to women and just flip the tables around.
So, okay, well, that's a great segue into, you know, you think that, okay, that's your childhood, that's your youth, you're doing that. Then you go into areas like Afghanistan that are dangerous to women. But then who would have thought that some of the places that would be the most dangerous to women would be places that would seem the, you know, the most rarefied, let's say. So tell us, there is a specific series of incidents, incident in your book where you talk about when you were offered a job and then started to work at Jared Kushner's
The Observer. So I was working at a company called cafe.com. It was a new website and I was really enjoying myself. It was fun, but I was only getting $39,000 a year, something obscene. That's like not a livable wage for a single mother of three, a solo mother of three at the time. And so Ken Kurson, who was the editor of The Observer, had Facebooked, messaged me. I didn't know who he was, but he said, I loved your piece about the Container Store. Would you want to work at The Observer? I said, well, I just signed a 6-month contract here. I can't. After 6 months was over, he emailed me again. He said, let's talk about you working here. And I thought, okay, well, it's a legacy publication. And, you know, I grew up reading the pink paper, you know, the Observer. I liked it back in the day. And so we had lunch. And at that lunch, you know, the first thing he said to me is, you know, how funny, here it is. It's so funny that we're talking about your story about your breast cancer while I'm staring at your breasts. And like, you know, creepy, weird, but maybe not psychotic, right? Like, you know, every woman in an interview situation, in a job situation is kind of always gauging like, am I in danger or is this guy just like have boundary issues? Like what's actually going on here? But
and there's also, you need the job. You need the job.
I needed a job. Yeah.
There's pressure on you to be like game and not be a prude and all those things. So how do you interpret all that? So keep going. Tell us the story.
So what happened was he just kept like dicking me around, and he'd said he'd offered the job of $65,000 a year at the lunch, and I decided I was just going to take it. And so then I was at Cafe was sold to Cafe bought a company called Scary Mommy, and Scary Mommy was brought in. The woman who calls herself Scary Mommy was brought in to basically be the boss, and she fired everyone. She fired my favorite, you know, editor. She fired another woman, Maggie, that I really loved. She fired Peter. She fired all the people that I loved, and then I was sort of the last woman standing, and I just saw the writing on the wall. And at one point, she calls me on the phone and she says, "You know, Deb, every time I read one of your stories, I just want to dumb it down and make it shorter." And I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. So I said yes to Ken. And then he wrote back saying, oh, wait, I don't know if there's a job here. I mean, I think he's like a sadist. I mean, it was so messed up. And then he sort of kept dangling the carrot, dangling the carrot, dangling the carrot. Meanwhile, these emails that kept rolling in were just like, in another life, I'd be Mr. Copaken. You know, my wife and I are getting divorced. What should I like? Just completely and utterly inappropriate for a boss to speak. I mean, we've all been following the Cuomo stuff. It's like, it's that kind of creepy stuff, but like over email more. And then finally, an email drops in my inbox and it says, how come you never asked me out? And I like actually had a panic attack that sent me to the hospital. I mean, it was just completely, I fainted. I couldn't breathe. And I just thought, oh my God, there's never going to be a job there, you know? And at that point I had to take a job. At that point I had to take a job at a PR firm because I knew.
And to be clear, like at that point, you really needed a job because you not only gotten divorced, but you ended up in debt after your divorce, as is so common.
Yeah, no, I was in 5 figures of debt. I was trying to get out of that debt. I had 2 kids in college. We were paying those tuitions, paying those fees and sorority fees and housing fees. You know, it's expensive sending kids to college. And, you know, I was stuck. And also I needed health insurance. So I didn't want to work free. He wanted me to, you know, keep working freelance. And we all know freelance, you get like $700 an article. That doesn't pay for your food. That pays for, you know, 2 weeks of groceries at this point, right? So like I needed a job with benefits. Anyway.
So fast forward to what happens with him.
So fast forward, the MeToo movement happens. It was months later, I finally write this up for the Atlantic. It was my first story for the Atlantic. I'm now, you know, sort of a contributing editor there. And my inbox in my email was filled with other women and actually 2 men who said, Ken Kurson did this to me. Ken Kurson did that to me. Like horrible things, really, really like frighteningly abusive things. One of them was so crazy that it was criminal. It was, like, it's so complicated, but he had called a woman. There was a doctor at Mount Sinai. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say because I think she's hidden herself, but anyway, he was stalking a woman. He was cyber stalking a woman and also stalking the wife of that woman's boss and ruining everybody's reputation and writing up terrible things on ZocDoc and just, you know, Rate My MD. Anyway, suddenly this man, this sexual harasser, is nominated to the Trump White House. So I get a call because of this article from the FBI. The FBI show up at my door. I refuse to let the FBI at my door without somebody else there, because I was just like, what's going on? So I got my friend Mary Beth Williams, who lived in Inwood. She's a writer for Salon. And she sat with me when the FBI came, and we were sort of holding hands while they were interviewing me. And I said, I have this entire spreadsheet of other complaints against him. And they said, can we have it? I said, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else I'm going to do with these complaints. It wasn't like I was going to write that up. So they took the spreadsheet of complaints. They started looking into it. They found out that this cyber stalking case was really intense, really dangerous, really bad. And he decided not to actually run for the position in the Trump White House for paperwork reasons. That's what was stated in the New York Times. And then in October of 2020, he was arrested by the FBI. But then he was on house arrest. It's COVID. Trump, on his last day in office, pardons him. And this man, Ken Kurson, knows that I'm the one that implicated him in this crime. And there's no protection. I called the FBI, I called lawyers. I have no protection against, you know, ratting out somebody for this.
I mean, in all honesty, Deb, that's one of the things I love most about you and that I admire most about you is that you have the courage of your convictions and you put your body on the line, whether it's in Afghanistan or if it's now, you know, with this pardoned felon out there doing, you know, who could do whatever he's going to do.
Who was arrested for cyber stalking. Let's not forget. I mean, that was his crime, you know?
So I'm not going to make this interview be a list of shitty men because it totally could be, but I want to talk about some of the things, like you've had experiences with men that have not just been like you referred to your to having been sexually assaulted, but you had an experience with a man who sexually assaulted you, who reached out to you. And I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about that, because that's kind of like the flip side. That's a moment where your courage and bravery and willing to put yourself out there actually resulted in something kind of in someone taking responsibility for themselves.
So yeah, it's a little bit different than what you remember, which is I reached out to him. So the Kavanaugh hearings were going on, right?
Right.
And all of us who'd ever experienced rape or date rape specifically, I know a lot of my friends who've been date raped, we were all having PTSD. I mean, it was really an intense experience watching this man get nominated. Whoops, my watch is talking to me. Watching this man get nominated to the Supreme Court with a credible rape accusation against him. And so what I did was I wrote a letter to my rapist, which actually is on my website right now, because so many people asked me what I wrote that I thought it could be used as a template if people need it. So it's on my website under the blog. But I wrote him a letter and I said, this is what happened. You raped me. I don't know if you remember it. I certainly remember it. I've been carrying it around for 30 years now, and it was literally 30 years. And it was Yom Kippur, the night that I wrote this. And he called me on the phone within 20 minutes of receiving, or within 20 minutes of me sending the letter. And his apology was intense. It was, I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I don't remember that night. I was a blackout drunk. I'm now in AA. You know, he went to AA and he did black out that night. Like he raped me and stayed in my bed because he passed out in my bed. And then when he woke up the next morning, he was like, oh, you know, happy graduation. Because it was my graduation from college the next day. I'll see you, you know, see you in the cap and gown. And he had no idea what he had done. And so I had to kind of tell him what he did that night, what it felt like from my end. And he was very emotional and very apologetic and, you know, said, I have 2 daughters. I can't even imagine anything like that happening to them. And it really, I know this sounds weird, but it was like, it was touching and it was moving and it was transformational insofar as it was something I was carrying around for 30 years. And now I don't even think about it.
That's
And
amazing.
when somebody mentions rape, it's like, I remember that I was raped, but it's not this like this heavy shoulder PTSD burden that I'm carrying around.
That's remarkable. I mean, you know, if for some that I can imagine that going so differently for other people. And I think you had no idea when you took that incredible risk, that's how it was going to happen for you. But you know, your courage and vulnerability, you know, is what allowed that experience to resolve both for yourself and for him. It's really remarkable.
Unfortunately, a lot of people have tried that as well and have gotten back to me and said, not only did it not work, but the guy was a total dick. And, you know,
Yeah.
so you never know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. Okay, so now I want to go, like, I really want to dig into the meat of the book. So this book begins with this truly astonishing incident. My favorite part of this incident is completely my favorite part because it's about my kid. But I want you just to start with, well, start in the bathroom and then take it from there.
All right. So the book opens with a case of vaginal cuff dehiscence, which I'd never heard about before I had it. I'd had dinner with your daughter, Rosie, the night before. And, and we made a plan to, I was going to take her to Beacon's Closet, which is a vintage clothing store in Williamsburg. We made a plan to go to Beacon's the next day. And then that next day, or it was 2 days later, sorry. We made a plan to go 2 days later. I went to a birthday dinner for my friend Jill on the Saturday night of July 2nd, I guess it was 2017. And I started feeling really sick at this dinner, like a really, really ill. I'd gone to the hospital or emergency room 2 weeks earlier saying something's wrong. It really is painful. I'm bleeding a lot. Something's wrong. And they're like, a little bleeding's normal. I'm like, this is like a deluge. And they're like, it's normal. Nobody looked inside me. They didn't put a speculum in me. The emergency room didn't have a OBGYN on staff. So they sent me home with an antibiotic they saw that I had an infection. One of my wounds had an infection and they sent me home without anything. So 2 weeks earlier, so I was afraid of crying wolf again, but I went home from the party early. And when I got home, like giant blood clots started shooting out of my body. And when I mean shooting out, I mean like with force, like onto the bathroom floor, everywhere, up and down the hallway. And I thought they were in my internal organs or some sort of viscera that I needed to like put back inside me. So I went to the kitchen and I got Tupperware, but then I thought, oh, I can't put them in plastic because what if it has BPVs? I don't know if this is good plastic or bad plastic. So I got glass Tupperware, of course.
As one does.
As one does. And I was like putting these things in the glass Tupperware. My daughter, Sasha, had just gotten home from Israel 4 hours earlier. And she passed out because she'd been traveling for 27 hours. And I woke her up and I said, I think I'm going to go to the hospital, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to reach, I kept trying to reach the hospital. Nobody was calling me back. What do you think these things are? And I show her this like Tupperware container of giant blood clots. And I said, do you think that these are, is this my kidney? My daughter was like, Mom, if that was your kidney, you'd be dead. What? By the way, I'm dropping her off at medical school right now. Her white coat ceremony is tomorrow. So
I wonder why she went to medical school. Go on.
Yeah. That's why I'm in this lovely hotel room. I'm in Buffalo right now. Yeah. So then I decided I was going to go to sleep, and she's like, no way are you going to sleep. And she dragged me outside, and then she wanted to call the ambulance, and I wouldn't let her call an ambulance because I know from having read articles that ambulance can cost. And I know also I once had a $1,200 bill for an ambulance, but they can cost up to $8,000. And I didn't have an extra $8,000. I'd just been let go of my PR firm job, and Ken Kirsten had not given me the job that he promised. I was jobless and bleeding out giant blood clots. And Sasha got me to the hospital, and I passed out immediately when I got there. I broke a rib on the way down. My blood clots in my Tupperware container went flying, splattered all over the hospital floor. I didn't see that, I was told. The next thing I remember, they're ripping my yoga pants off. That's when I came to, and I was like screaming at them like, no, those are my favorite pair. Don't do that. And then I went in for emergency surgery to
Wait, but before you went into for emergency
yeah.
surgery,
I text
you made
Rosie.
sure to text Rosie and tell her you couldn't take her to Beacon's closet the next day, because the mom part was gonna, even if you were, and you were literally dying of blood loss, but you were like, can't let my friend's daughter go to the vintage store and expecting to see me. It's so amazing. I mean, like, so much of what that story encompasses, it's like the callousness with these themes that are in your book, the callousness of the medical establishment towards women, the not being willing to listen to women tell their stories about, and or talk about their own bodies, and then there's like the ridiculous financial burden that this medical system puts on us. And I wonder if you could just sort of talk a little bit about that, about like, maybe what I'm asking is almost more of a macro, like the way that this book is constructed is very purposeful. You construct it as a tour through your body, and maybe tell us why, and why,
Sure.
why the book is constructed the way it is, and what that means.
So much happened to me in the 10 years between 2011 and recently, right? Just so much happened, more plot than you would ever put in a novel. And I had thought about writing about it, but I just could not come up with a way, a form for this trauma. I mean, there's like trauma after trauma after trauma. And how do you tell that story, right? It's just so dense with events. And then I was in the shower one day, and I looked down at my, soaping my stomach, and I was sort of examining each of the little scars there, and that's the hysterectomy, and that's the trachelectomy, and that's where they did this, and that's my appendectomy. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, that each piece of me that came out or broke in some way was a temporal overlay, right? You could create chapters from that, and that in fact each body part had a metaphoric significance, meaning in uterus, my uterus was removed in my hysterectomy at the same time that my daughter got her period for the first time, and the same time that my mentor, who became kind of my New York City mom, Nora Ephron, died. And so there you have the uterus, symbol of motherhood, and my daughter getting her period, and this mentor dying. And then, breast, right? Breast is the symbol of motherhood. I was dropping off my son at college when I found a breast lump and became a single mother at the same time. So, and heart, I was, my heart went on the fritz and had this thing called PVCs right at the time that I was dating. And I had to wear a Holter monitor on these Tinder dates, which is like, you have little sticky nodes all over your chest, and a little side pouch that, has bells and whistles. And if your heart rate's too fast, like, it beeps. And anyway, every body part had a significant metaphor for what else was going on at the time.
Well, and it is really like a beautiful construction. I want to go back to that idea of the Tinder date, because I feel like our audience is maybe imagining you, sad Deb with her sad machine, trying to get laid on Tinder. Sure, that's not going to work. And yet The truth is, who were you getting fucking on Tinder, Deb? Who?
What?
All those 23-year-old, 24-year-old,
Oh, yeah,
25-year-old
yeah,
guys?
no. Well, I was trying to date men my age, and they were just one after the other horrible, like blaming their wives for their divorces, just like angry and sad and angry and too much bad energy. And so I lowered my parameters to, I think it was like 31 and above. Well, I was 47 or 48. And then I just started dating younger men. And it was just because I thought to myself, I'm never going to find a partner again. There's just statistically, I'm never going to find a partner. So I might as well have fun with these, years of my life. And I did. I mean, it was more than actual fun. Like I dated two much younger men, and each of them taught me something. And each of them are still friends with us. One of them, my partner, my current partner, Will, really loves this one guy. I mean, he's in our lives. And I had fun. I had fun.
Well, those of us who were getting the pictures of these guys, and I'm sorry, 31, they were younger than 31. Those of us who were getting the pictures of those guys also had fun because they were so adorable, particularly that adorable blonde musician. That was my personal favorite. He was so cute. But I mean, but I actually I lived sort of, and I think the reader also kind of, you live vicariously through those experiences because we're so used when we're this age as women to the world conspires to make us feel like we're not sexy, like we're not sexual beings, like we're ugly, like we're unattractive, or like we're invisible. I mean, that's almost best case. The real truth is like we're invisible. And then to see you at that age when we're being erased, not just like dating, but actually having these incredibly satisfying relationships with people who are, make you feel sexy, who see you as you are is really, it's empowering. It was empowering to read and it was empowering to hear about. And I wonder if it was empowering to experience too.
It was empowering, but I also saw it really from an economic lens, right? It wasn't just that I was attracted to them because I think, I'm okay attractive, but I wasn't that attractive to like be the object of these men's affection, right? What it was an economic situation that these men were born into a situation where the women that wanted to date wanted to get married and they wanted security, and men who were 30 during that period of time, which was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, they did not see a future for themselves, nor do a lot of kids. Our kids and the millennial generation does not really see a future where they own a home or can afford anything or can afford to go on vacation or can afford any, like, so what I think it was is that they couldn't date women their age because those women their age would want to get married right away and they couldn't afford to have a kid. So I was a way station, a place to like be calm and have sort of a nice time and a loving relationship that didn't have to go anywhere because we obviously wasn't going to go anywhere. I didn't have a uterus. I'm not going to provide them a child. And so I do look at it very much through an economic lens.
So I see now, like, I hear you saying what you gave them. Want to tell us a little bit about what
they
gave
gave me a new perspective. Also, I believe men of that generation have been taught what women want and need in bed in a way that our generation of men may not have. I think that sex ed has gotten much better. Maybe they do discuss the clitoris in sex ed classes these days instead of just like reproduction. And I felt loved. I mean, it sounds so love, it was a mutual exchange of kind of kindness and care and love.
I mean, I don't think it sounds cheesy at all. But you came into that moment really not being emotional. I'm not saying your ex was emotionally battering you, but you were battered. You were bruised from this marriage that had gone awry. And the way that it fell apart was so hard and so painful. Are you okay with talking about that? I mean, it's one thing to bear it on the page, but were you okay to sort of talk about like where you were that got you to that point?
So, my ex and I are quite good friends now. We can talk about this stuff. And, before I left to come here to Buffalo to drop my daughter off, we had a goodbye party, and my partner Will was like, we should invite, your ex, and it's all kind of modern family these days, right? Everybody's happy together. It's fine. We all get along. But even he, I believe, would say that he's getting so much better at all this. I want to say he's getting so much better at all of this, but he was diagnosed at 44 with Asperger's, which basically meant that whenever I was screaming at him, you have no empathy, he had no idea what I meant. And I saw it as sort of, before we had this diagnosis, I saw it as sort of willful cruelty. And then once we had this diagnosis, I could sort of reframe it as, oh, okay, he literally doesn't understand what I mean by the word empathy. And that's on me. I had to step back from my righteous indignation and say, his brain's different than yours. Stop yelling at him. Like, how can we make this marriage work? We ultimately didn't make the marriage work. It was ultimately doomed for failure. And I think that my kids would even say that we made the right move. We were not paired well, but it's nice to have him back as a friend, and it's nice to have him back in the kids' lives, and he's here and he's very present, and he's with my youngest right now. And anyway, that's how things are with us.
I'm glad that that's where you guys are. It's so, it seems like when you are divorced, you're divorced in so many different stages that are so discrete. I mean, whenever I don't know about you, but I have so many friends and family who are getting divorced as a result of COVID. I think it really kind of crystallized a lot for so many people. And when people feel like they really can't do it, they call me, they're crying. I like to tell them the story of this friend I had who did her own divorce. So you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I just had no money and I was in a lot of debt. And so a divorce lawyer wants a $30,000 retainer in New York City. That's minimum. And I don't have a $30,000 retainer at all. So I basically studied the law online. I studied what I had to do. I found this woman who was a lawyer, sort of a charity lawyer for women who were much more dire straits than me. She couldn't represent me, but she could answer my questions. And she was very, very, her name's Antoinette, and she's lovely. And she would just answer my questions. And I say like, okay, what form do I need? And when do I file? Which room do I file it in? But I did all the legwork myself. And there was sort of one moment that I write about in the book where I had had knee surgery. I had a torn meniscus, and I needed to get these papers to the courthouse, that day, like a week after knee surgery. So I'm like walking up the courthouse with my crutches and my big bag of file of papers that I had to file, and like, okay, crutch up one step, carry the bag up, crutch up one step, carry the bag up. And finally at the top of the stairs, I notice the sign for the handicapped entrance. And I was like, oh, there was an elevator.
But you did it. You did your own DIY divorce.
I did my own divorce. I would not recommend it. It was hard and it was torturous. And I had sort of made the decision that I wasn't going to ask for anything. So I didn't ask for alimony. My ex and I didn't have any property to split, so that made it a lot easier. There was just debt to deal with, right? I took on all the credit card debt that was in our names. And then we worked out a custody agreement. It wasn't fun, and there was conflict, and it was not fun to have that conflict without a lawyer in between us, but ultimately it worked. I think we were both happy that we were not spending $30,000 each. I mean, the divorce racket in this country is insane. You know how much it costs to get divorced in China? I think it's $1.70. Like, every other country, almost every other country, you can just sort of go talk to a judge and it's done. And it's like, at the most $200. And you don't need a lawyer because the judge will just help you do it. But we have in this country created capitalism in the courtroom, and there is a divorce racket, and we shouldn't need to, and also the way that lawyers do these divorces, it just like it ratchets up the stress, it ratchets up the conflict, and who needs that while you're getting divorced? Like, seriously, why can't we just all kind of get along? But my divorce cost altogether $600 and something because those were the filing costs and the cost of hiring somebody to serve papers and the cost of getting a new passport. I mean, I put everything, like, how much did it cost to get divorced? Because I had to do this for the Atlantic, and we came up with, I think it was like $675 or something like that.
Amazing. Amazing. And when you think of people, just even people of very little means who spend tens of thousands of dollars that they don't have to do this. I mean, there is so much in this book. Like, you know, when I'm describing this book to people, I say, you know, maybe on the deepest, most profound level, it's an indictment of capitalism.
Yeah,
From like
absolutely
all through. So like, talk about that a little bit. Like,
I
you
think
talk
it's
about
actually
it in a divorce context, but
it's an indictment of American style capitalism. I mean, I think there's capitalist societies in the world that are doing just fine. You know, all the Scandinavian countries, France, Denmark, like they are actually having countries where you can get your health care, where you can get your child into a creche, where you get paid maternity leave, where somebody shows up at your house and teaches you how to breastfeed. Like, they understand, those countries, that women have babies and that babies need care, and that women who want to work need to have somebody watch those babies while they work. We pretend like babies don't exist. Women should just have them and figure out how to work, and we don't want to think about it. I begin the book on a 4th of July weekend because that's when I bled out from vaginal cleft dehiscence, and I deliberately ended it on a 4th of July weekend. This is overall a book about America. It's about how we do not deal with childcare, healthcare, maternity leave, you know, our sexual harassment issues, the way that we can get fired at will. I mean, I just got fired from one job for spending too much time at Sloan Kettering. I had 9 absences for dealing with a stage 0 breast cancer, which was not even breast cancer. I don't even want to call it breast cancer. One doctor called it atypia. Another one called it stage 0. One doctor said I should get a mastectomy. The other one's like, wait and see. You know, we don't even know what these things are when they happen. But 9 visits to Sloan Kettering, and I was out of a job at a health magazine. Okay. And, you know, and then I got let go from a PR firm because they said I was not a good fit. Not a good fit is code for you are too old. Not a good fit. When somebody says that, it's actually actionable at this point. Not a good fit doesn't mean anything. Like, show me what she did wrong. Nothing. Anyway.
Well, I think that's a great sort of moment, having talked about the July to the 4th of July weekend to the 4th of July weekend, this brilliant book that's so personal and so intimate, and that is also this incredible indictment of America and American capitalism and American values, at the same time as being full of joy and full of life and love. And I think, Kathleen, do we have questions that we can go to?
We don't have questions yet, but we have a lot of people watching on Facebook Live, so I'm watching both streams. So anybody, you guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. I'll read them out to Ayelet and Deb.
And meanwhile, while we wait, tell us about that time you tried to get a job at the Container Store. How'd that go?
So I was, I'd had this breast cancer diagnosis, then it went away, and then I needed to get an MRI to make sure that the lump was gone. And I didn't have health insurance. So I was trying to figure out a way just to get health insurance quickly while I was looking for another job. I mean, the other thing to realize is the media landscape was crumbling all around us during this time. This is 2013, and media jobs were being lost left and right. What I once was able to earn like $2 a word for a magazine story. So if I wrote 2,000 words, I get $4,000. If I wrote 4,000 words, I get $8,000. That's money. That's actual money that you can use. suddenly what I would get $8,000 for, I was now getting 700, 200, 300. Magazines stopped paying for their words because Facebook and Google took all the ad dollars. So I just was in a moment where I was like, I'm going to work anywhere. I can work anywhere at this point. I am going to get a job. I saw that there was a job opening. I got I had all these LinkedIn and stuff. Like I got a notice that there was a Christmas 3-month job at the Container Store with benefits. I was like, okay, if I can get benefits for 3 months, I'll give a bridge to my next job. So I applied for this job at the Container Store and I didn't even get an interview. They're like, sorry, we're looking at other candidates at this time. And I was just like, if I can't even get a job at the Container Store, like what's going on right now in America?
Well, we have a question from Sharon, and it's for Deb. You keep referring to your children as mine, even in the context of your ex-husband. Is this intentional?
I wouldn't say
My
our
kids
children.
mine. I've been married for 30 years and I mean, I guess sometimes I say ours, but I always call them my kids.
My
Don't
kids.
you?
Yeah, no, I don't. I would call them my kids back when I was married too. I mean, I'm a me. I'm an I. I'm not a. Even as a part of a couple, I'm a me. I'm an I. They're my kids.
Yeah.
So I have
Maybe when I'm angry with them, I might say, your kid.
Yes. No, but it's an interesting question. I don't mean to deflect the question. I just mean I never actually thought about that. And it's interesting that Sharon noted this, but no, I've always just said my kids.
But also at this point, you and Paul are not like, you do live this very sort of post, it's like like you say, modern family life, but you are not a we anymore. Like you have
So
a
my we is a man with whom I do not share children. Yes.
Kathleen, was there another question that you said?
Yes, we've got from Kathy Wallerman. She says, Deborah, you were a photojournalist in your 20s. Since then, have you ever wanted to get a job using your photography skills? Is this really difficult in New York City?
Oh, so I actually shoot. I mean, I haven't. I'm shooting a portrait session that I can't talk about, but it's a really funny person on Monday. Like, so I still get jobs in photography. I didn't want to work as a newspaper photographer only because like my back started hurting too. And you have to carry around a lot of equipment as a photojournalist. So I really enjoy shooting author headshots. I shot Ayelet couple times, I think. I shot you and Michael that I shot that I love in that hotel. I shoot every day because we all have iPhones. In fact, my kids get really upset with me. Or I was at Niagara Falls the other day and so many people were taking selfies and I'm like, stop, give me your camera. And I take their photo in front of Niagara Falls because I'm like, I don't want these bad photos of them in front of this beautiful, this beautiful. And my daughter was like, okay, mom, no more, no more, no more.
And it's always, I always say that like Deb could shoot on an iPhone a photograph that is, is every photograph of hers you could see on one of those huge billboards. I love Deb's photography so much that I managed to scam her into shooting my daughter's wedding.
I can't wait. That's gonna be like, I'm gonna be crying behind that lens. So
good. So we have a question here about, you did your own audiobook, which is amazing and a huge effort. I mean, this is a big book. So tell us what it was like to narrate the book, and tell us about like, were you directed? Was there an engineer directing you or a director? What was that like?
So it was COVID rules, right? So I did my audiobook during COVID. So I had been vaccinated at that point. I'm not sure how many other people had. It was just right at that vaccination moment. So I couldn't be in the studio with the engineer or the director. So the director was in LA, the engineer was in New Jersey. I had them in my headset. And if I started to read too fast, or I like skipped a word, or I mispronounced a lot of words. I mean, I didn't realize how many words I think are pronounced. Like, for example, I thought the word minutaie is minutia. And the guy said, no, it's minutae or something. I don't even know what it is, but it's not minutia.
Oh, what do you mean it's not minutia?
It's not minutia. It's not minutia. It's minutae or something. somebody will let us know, but it's not what I thought. But anyway,
Somebody who's, you know, put it in the comments if you know how, if you have a correction for us.
but I really, really, really enjoyed doing the audiobook. In fact, it was using new muscles. It was using old muscles because I'd grown up as a kid thespian. You know, I did all the school plays. I did school plays all the way through college. I acted in one film once. I like performance, and I haven't done it since I was 22. So it was really like refining a piece of myself that had been lost. And I actually said to the Random House people, I was like, if you need somebody else's book read, I would be happily read one.
Which reminds me, there's a section in the book where you talk about this experience that you had out of the blue, totally, you know, for something that you would not have expected of yourself, where you started doing improv. While we're waiting for questions, tell us a little bit about that.
So I decided to sign up for improv at a moment where I like literally was just, I was suicidal. I mean, I really was. I didn't see a reason to live anymore. And I just thought that the antidote to that would be yes and I'd done some improv in college, and I just thought, well, maybe I'll just take an improv class that'll get me out of my house. I can do it late at night when my kids, you know, my older one can watch the younger one. I'll do it after work one day. And so my friend Julie Dresner and I took it was stage 0 improv class, where I ended up meeting Brittany, who became our live-in babysitter, who's awesome. She's an amazing young woman. And then it really did teach me how to yes and my life. You know, here's the theory of improv for people that don't know it. If you say, here's my moisturizer, the person can't say, that's not moisturizer. They have to say, oh, I'm going to use it on my cat. And then you say, you're going to use it on your cat. And then I'm going to take it and put your cat in the, you know, you have to build, you have to yes and whatever they say, you accept, you take in, and you and it, you amplify it so that you're never saying, no, this is not a moisturizer. And it sounds really simple, but when you apply it to your life, it's kind of beautiful. And so there was a moment where my friend Marion had asked, can I have my niece and her 2 friends stay with you in New York? I was like, yes, and I could have them act in this film that these friends are, you know, this woman is shooting in my apartment. And there was one moment where we literally had 30 extras for a film in our apartment. Sasha, my daughter, is trying to do her homework, and my friend Soman Chainani, who writes the School for Good and Evil series, walks in because he was coming over for dinner, and he can't find a place to sit. And he says to Sasha, he's like, what's going on here? And she's like, oh, that's just mom. She's saying yes and to everything.
You know, Deb, one thing that I really love is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many of us are on social media with you, but I love how you have such a great relationship with your kids.
Oh,
I mean, it just really, you know, I kind of think of you as like the mom. You know, you're always talking about how great they are and their accomplishments. What do they think? What was their reaction to this book? Because they are throughout this entire book.
the boys are not going to read it. They've said that they don't want to read it. And my daughter insisted on reading it before it was published, and being able to have veto power over anything that was written in there. And I said, absolutely. She's really in there a lot more than the boys, because my son was at college. The little one was often asleep, you know, so Sasha is the one that kind of gets me to the hospital, is the one that, you know, I betray in a way, and I don't want to give away a piece of the book, but there was just a moment where she finds out something that she shouldn't have found out the way that she found out. And so she really, I understood why she wanted to make sure that she was okay. And she actually went through and changed some of her dialogue and said, no, I wouldn't say it this way. This is the way I would say it. And it was actually really useful because, you know, everybody remembers life a different way. I remember a scene in one way. You're going to remember a scene a different way. We all have our own perspectives. That's memoir, right? Memoir is one person's perspective. But in this case, because it was my child's dialogue, and because she felt it was important to take a look at it, I did let her change sentences, phrases, dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing I write about my kids too. And there's a moment in time where you're like, oh, now they get veto power. Like they actually have their own story to tell. So if I'm going to write their story, I have to do it with their permission and their input.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
go on.
Another question I have, I don't know how many of the people out there know that Deb did have COVID during this time.
Oh yeah, maybe that's a
And,
good place for us to close
And
that
I
up.
wanted to know, will you include that in the paperback updates?
So, my book proposal did not have the chapter called lungs in it, but then after I'd handed in the book on March 18th, 2020, that's the day I got COVID. And my editor, Mark Warren, and I were like, yeah, I guess we got to add lungs now. I wrote an extra chapter. That chapter's in the hardback version. So the last chapter is lungs. And look, we got it in March of 2020. There were no tests. There was no beds in New York City. There were no masks. We couldn't find masks. My sister, Jen, very kindly called a friend of hers in Singapore and got me some masks because I didn't want to infect other people. I wanted to make sure I had a mask on, but we literally couldn't buy a mask in the United States at that time.
Yeah, and you had a brutal case of COVID. You had a bad one.
I had a case of COVID in which my SpO2, which is your oxygen level, went down to 92, which is not horrible, but not breathable. So as I described it to you on the phone, Ayelet, I remember I said, I feel like a fish flopping on the shore. Like I can get in some oxygen, but it's like, it was intense. And there was really one night that I was like, I didn't think I was going to make it. I called my doctor. I said, I think I need to come to the hospital. And he said, don't come to the hospital. All of my patients at the hospital died last night. There are no beds. You'll get a viral load here that your body will not be able to take. You're safer alone, isolated in your bedroom. And he sent me a nebulizer. He sent me a, steroid inhaler. I had all the medications one could have. But that night I actually discovered, before the doctors did, that if you lie on your stomach, that the lungs go down so that you could use gravity to help your lungs expand. And so I slept like this with pillows underneath me to give my lungs a little space to go down. And I realized I could breathe better that way. And then like a week later, the doctor's like, oh, we're learning how to turn people so that they can breathe.
Amazing. Well, let's take Kathleen. Do you want to close it up with one last question? Because we're almost.
Is there a question out there, anybody? We have a lot of people watching on Facebook, and we have a lot of people in our chat. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I have a million questions, so Ayelet knows that.
Let's close out with one more. Kathleen, give us our last question. But you know what? Before we do that, I wanted to say something. This is important. This is about Deb. You guys know that the world is full of independent bookstores that provide a kind of service that they build our communities, they open new worlds for us, they spend hours telling us what we should read and finding exciting new authors for us. And so often nowadays, people will either call a bookstore or go into a bookstore, suck all this information from people like Kathleen, and then pull out their phones and order their fucking book from Amazon. And that is so despicable, and it happens all the time. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Every one of you on Facebook, on Zoom, what I want you to do is go to the Great Good Place for Books book website. And I want you to put in an order for Deb's book on that website from Kathleen. That person you see on your screen, this is the human being, the repository of all sorts of wonderful information and advice about literature, and the person who you have to keep in business because we as a society cannot afford to lose our independent bookstores. So while Kathleen is asking her last question, all of you go and buy the book because Deb also needs the cash and help these two marvelous women earn a living in this tough, tough world. Okay, take it away, Kathleen.
Thank you,
Ayelet. I don't even know where to go from there, but maybe I won't ask a question. Maybe I'm just gonna thank you both. it's been many years. I mean, I can tell you that Ayelet's been through a lot with me over the years. Deb, we had so much fun when you were in town that we ended up staying in touch forever after that. So, I mean, I feel very lucky to have you in my life. And I feel that, we need to support these ladies too and keep them writing. So buy their books. That's all I can say.
Thank you,
And there's
Kath.
a link in the Zoom. The link to a great good place for books, to the book Lady Parts, is in the Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, go click that link and buy the book. And Deb, you're going to close us out.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to say something, which is that it was so exciting meeting with these two tonight, because I'm pointing down because I'm in the square here and you guys are in the squares down there. Kathleen, you are an incredible cheerleader for books and authors in a way that I have never seen in any other bookstore. You are an amazing advocate for writers, and I want to thank you for that. And Ayelet, and I want to say to everybody else, Ayelet's in this book. If you want to know what kind of friend Ayelet is, she appears over and over and over again, because every time some misogynist bullshit happened, I called Ayelet. And in fact, it just happened again the other day. We do a 7-minute Zoom together every day since COVID started. And I got this misogynist review and I cried with Ayelet, with all of our 7-minute friends. And then it was over. At 7 minutes later, it was done.
So we have a comment from Laura Mazer on Facebook who writes, I use Amazon as a database only.
Yay. That's the
Long
way
live
to do
real
it.
bookstores.
Laura Mazer's a really great editor, by the way.
All
Where
right,
does
you guys.
Well, hi, Laura. Well, I think that, we're at our hour and this has been such a joy. And I need to tell you, as Mike can attest, I've been looking forward to this event.
How about we? All right, you
And
guys, go buy some books.
and let's do one big. Woo! Oh, thanks, ladies.
Bye.